Before the trenches split the world, before the heresies and the saints, there were only the heavens. Once, the sky was a place of clarity, a sanctuary of silence and stars, a place to look for meaning, to lift prayers into the unknown, but no longer. Now the heavens do not shine, they bleed. Those who look up see not stars, but wounds in the sky, rents that stir dread, awe, and madness in equal measure. It is not a sight meant for understanding, only for enduring. Above the broken world hangs something worse than wrath, something colder than judgment. The sky is cracked, not in symbol, but in structure. Angels descend, not in glory, but in rupture, tearing through the fabric of space, faith and memory itself. Their arrival is not a proclamation, but a wound, not a blessing, but a break in the order of all things. Demons do not crawl from hell. They rise from belief, unspoken too long. In this chapter of the war, we look upward and inward, to those who come from above and below, to those who are not men and never were, angels that burn without fire, demons that echo, forgotten prayers, and the third kind, whose names have no place in Scripture, to the witnesses that walk without purpose, and the madness that sings in their shadows. This is not a tale of salvation. It is not a hymn. It is a scream stitched into liturgy, a contradiction made sacred, a theology of fear. Welcome to episode 7, where we do not speak of God, only what comes after. Chapter 1. The choirs of heaven and the howl of hell. There is no sky above the trenches, only a canopy of shifting smoke and shattered prayers, echoing with the sound of distant hymns and closer screams. It is said that the heavens themselves cracked open long ago, not with trumpet blasts or divine thunder, but with the slow grinding of belief tearing itself in two. From that rift spilled light and fire, voices and forms, wings both golden and bladed, and things that should not sing, but did. They call them angels and demons, and other names too. Older, stranger, whispered through mud-caked teeth in the final seconds before death. But names are fragile things in the Trench Crusade. What matters is this. They walk among us now. Some glow, others bleed. A few do both. In the early days, when the war was still young and time still moved in a straight line, sightings were rare, glimpses in the fog, silhouettes against distant fires, figures whose feet did not touch mud, but left footprints all the same. Pilgrims took these visions as blessings, generals took them as omens, priests took them as proof. But war has a way of making everything more blood, more noise, more gods. The angels became common, not in number, but in presence. One did not need to see them, to feel them. The smell of ozone before a barrage, the way bullets curved around a broken statue, the silence after certain names were spoken aloud. All these were signs of angelic proximity, and then there were the other ones. The ones with wings like screaming mouths, the ones that wept smoke, and whose shadows moved the wrong way, the ones that laughed during sermons and cried during executions. We called them demons, because it was easier than admitting we didn't know what they were. They did not come from below. They came from between moments, between trenches, between thoughts. They fed on belief, but not just ours. They gorged on doubt, on memory, on the quiet heresies we whisper when we think we are alone. There are orders dedicated to both: the choir priests, who chase the footsteps of the radiant ones, wrapping themselves in thorns and hymns, hoping to be noticed; the abyssal lexicon, who catalogue the appearances of the other kind, binding themselves with runes written in languages they cannot read. Both suffer, both sacrifice, both are consumed. It is said that some angels and demons were once men. Others say that men are simply the larvae of angels. Still others say that the difference between angel and demon is which way you're facing when the miracle hits you. One account tells of a battlefield where every soldier heard a different song and all laid down their weapons to listen. Another speaks of a woman who gave birth to a burning wheel of eyes, which whispered secrets from scripture no one had ever written. Some say the saints of the old wars are being reborn, not as men, but as wings and light and sorrow. Miracles happen here, but they are not kind. An angel appeared during the siege of the hollow basilica. It moved without sound, shedding feathers made of scripture and heat. Where they fell, wounds closed. Where it looked, men wept. It passed over the front line, and those it did not touch forgot the names of their children. Its presence ended the siege, not with victory, but with silence. No one would fight in a place where it had walked. A demon walked the no-grounds near the screaming cross. It carried a chalice made of its own teeth and drank from it endlessly. Every drop it spilled became a copy of itself. For 3 days the trenches bled backwards. Men rose from graves speaking in voices they never had. Maps rewrote themselves. Time began to loop. Eventually it simply stopped. Soldiers found themselves caught in endless gestures, lighting the same cigarette over and over, repeating prayers that unraveled into nonsense, blinking in perfect rhythm with men already dead. Orders were given, forgotten, and given again. Hunger faded. Pain dulled. The wind carried the same conversation on a loop, whispered across bunkers, as if the earth itself had nothing new to say. For some, the realization never came. For others, it shattered them. They clawed at their own faces to break the cycle. A few laughed and claimed they had stepped outside of time entirely, that they had seen the first prayer ever spoken and the last breath ever drawn. None of them survived the return of the clock. What are they? Theologians argue. So do soldiers. In the trenches, the difference hardly matters. They are phenomena, intrusions, holy storms. Some pass through and leave behind nothing but songs. Others leave scars that never heal, not on flesh, but on meaning. And yet, there are those who worship the cult of the falling flame, tracks angelic trajectories, and gathers at predicted impact sites, which they determine through obsessive pattern analysis of celestial disturbances, battlefield miracles, and the trajectory of falling feathers, recorded across dozens of war fronts, wearing robes of ash and bone. The Order of the Inverted Eye believes that demons are the true expression of divinity, for they do not lie about the pain of existence. There are heresies within heresies, and new gospels are written in blood every day. Some units carry relics, said to attract angels, shards of stained glass, splinters of holy altars, teeth etched with psalms. Others bury cursed tokens near their foxholes, hoping to lure demons into enemy ranks. Neither tactic is reliable. Both are used. Even the machines are not safe. Satanics have reported visions. War engines go still when certain hymns are sung. Some say the angels speak in code. Others say the demons speak in static. But all agree, the war is no longer just between men. There are things in the sky. There are things in the mud. There are songs without singers, screams without mouths, and every so often, when the gunfire stops and the fog lifts just so, you can see them standing in the distance, watching, waiting, or perhaps remembering a time before the world broke in half.
We do not know what they want, only that they are here and that the heavens are not silent.
There are trenches no one dares to enter, not because of the enemy's firepower, but because of the music that rises from them unbidden, a haunting melody of impossible chords and spectral harmonies that lace the air like incense, infecting the hearts of the faithful and the doubters alike. Whole battalions have vanished there, their gear left behind in perfect arrangements, rifles stacked like altars, boots side by side, helmets cradling last prayers written in blood and dirt. Those who have returned from such places do not speak. Their mouths move, but only the wind replies. On the southern fronts, a rumor lingers of a being neither angel nor demon, whose presence heralds the convergence of both. They call it the reconciler, though none agree what it reconciles, only that its arrival always coincides with mass hallucinations, the blurring of friend and foe, and the sudden cessation of hostilities. Some say it walks the trenches blindfolded, others that it has no face at all. It is said to speak in voices stolen from the dead, and to weep oil from where its eyes should be. Every record of its passage ends in silence, as if the world itself chooses to forget. And always there are the lights, strange constellations that should not exist, flickering where no stars can be. These appear during the worst nights, when the ground itself moans and the rain tastes like communion wine. Soldiers swear these lights descend in spirals, forming runes in the sky that no one dares to read. One unit, the 88th failed, etched those shapes into their trench walls, believing it would protect them. None survived, but their trench still glows. What follows is not found in any sanctioned chronicle, and is dismissed by most archivists as hearsay. The final transmission from their position was a static-laced whisper, repeating the same unintelligible phrase, followed by silence. When scouts arrived weeks later, they found no bodies, only gear arranged with unnatural symmetry, and the walls of the trench glowing faintly as if remembering them in light. There are whispers of a cathedral that exists in no fixed place, moving with the tides of faith and disbelief. Some claim it is built of bone and light. Others say it is buried in mud and memory. It is never found the same way twice. To some, it grants visions. To others, madness. A few are given both. It is said that within its halls, angels and demons sit side by side in silent prayer, weeping over something neither will name. Whatever that cathedral is, it haunts every sermon now, its outline sometimes glimpsed in the after images left by gunfire or lightning. And so we keep watch. We build our walls, dig our trenches, sanctify our bullets, and pray to whatever will listen. But the heavens are not ours, Not anymore. They have come undone, and what spilled out does not belong to any creed, any doctrine, any name that survives in the mouths of men. There are new songs now, new scriptures being written in the blood mist of battle and in the cries of those who see too clearly, whether they are angels, demons, or something beyond either. One truth remains. They are listening, and we are not alone in the mud. Chapter 2. The Third Heaven. They say the third heaven is not a place, but a condition, not elevation, nor ascent, but fracture of self, of spirit, of sky. It is not found on maps, though maps sometimes bleed its symbols. It cannot be reached by pilgrimage, though pilgrims are drawn to it like moths to the scent of old fire. It cannot be seen by those who look, only by those who surrender. The third heaven is not above. It is between, and it is where the war becomes myth. Some accounts call it a battlefield, others a shrine, and a few claim it is the corpse of a dead god, still dreaming. But all agree on one thing: no one returns unchanged. The first whispers of the third heaven came not from seers or generals, but from the mouths of the lost, soldiers pulled from collapsed bunkers, eyes wide with unknowable geometry burned into their retinas, children born during trench eclipses, speaking languages that no one ever taught them, wounded men who healed overnight, but could no longer be touched. Their testimonies were fragmented, impossible, and eerily similar. They spoke of towers made of prayers, floating rings of song, orbiting black stars, and blood that ran upward. They described angels that wept scripture like rain, and demons that stitched silence into the mouths of time. One tale, unconfirmed but oft repeated, tells of a regiment that marched into a fog-choked valley and never returned. What emerged days later was not a regiment, but a procession, not soldiers, but witnesses clad in robes they had never worn, bearing wounds shaped like holy symbols, their mouths sewn shut with gold thread. When the thread was removed, they did not scream, they sang. Their voices caused the ears of nearby animals to bleed. The third heaven is not always the same. It adapts, it responds, it learns. Some who have entered say it is made of impossible architecture, cathedrals that fold into themselves, stairways that end in mirrors, sermons spoken by the walls. Others say it is a field of broken instruments, where the wind carries forgotten hymns across cracked earth. And some say it is a great absence, a void where every prayer ever uttered echoes back with a different meaning. But whether made of stone, sound, or nothing at all, its influence reaches far beyond its unseen borders. Artifacts touched by the third heaven warp reality. Some are found in the wake of angelic or demonic passage, as if left behind in haste or ceremony. Others appear to be gifted, or perhaps imposed upon the faithful during moments of ecstatic revelation. A few are uncovered deep within no man's land, embedded in impossible geometries, or buried beneath altars made of bone and wire. Their origins remain a subject of endless theological debate, but all agree they are not of this world as we know it. A crucifix pulled from the site of a known visitation, was said to drip oil that turned mud to glass. A book found buried in barbed wire recited new passages each time it was opened, none of which existed in any known scripture. A blade left behind by an angelic presence refuses to dull and hums quietly when held in prayer. Some believe the third heaven is not one place, but many, a confluence of all sacred contradictions, condensed into a wound in the world. Others say it is the future, bleeding backward into the present. Still others suggest it is the past, purified by fire and returned to test the faithful. And yet there are those who seek it. They call themselves the Ascendant Choir. Clad in veils of ash and ink, they wander the front in silence, recording anomalies, collecting whispers, and translating screams. They believe the third heaven is the final revelation, that to enter it is to become both sermon and saint, transcendent and martyred, a living scripture, inscribed upon the battlefield. Few understand their purpose. Fewer still trust it, but they walk untouched through hellfire, and that is enough for many to follow. Not all who enter are chosen. Some are simply taken. During the siege of the Argent Maw, a detachment of engineers vanished beneath the trench network, descending into a substructure that had never been mapped. Only one returned. Her helmet was fused to her skull, her fingers replaced with threads of luminous script. She spoke only once, and her words were recorded in 12 languages simultaneously. The wound sings. The wound remembers. We are its choir. No one has heard from her since. Others have not returned at all, yet are seen clearly, impossibly, in photographs, murals, and dreams. A medic lost in the Battle of St. Ruin appears in 37 separate trench sketches across 3 continents, always kneeling in prayer before a veiled door. A chaplain who vanished mid-sermon is rumored to now wander the front lines of multiple war zones, glowing faintly, speaking only to the dying. These sightings are never confirmed, but those who experience them often fall into prolonged trances, muttering equations that resemble both prayer and artillery range tables. The third heaven does not answer questions. It unasks them. It does not offer visions. It becomes them. And though it cannot be captured, not even in prayer, its song grows louder every day. The choir grows too. Not just the ascendant, but others, lone wanderers, who begin to sing without knowing why. Archivists, who dream in perfect harmony. Machines that glitch into liturgy. A saint mech on the Western Reach halted mid-crusade and began broadcasting a continuous tone that cracked concrete and inspired spontaneous weeping in anyone within 10 clicks. It was eventually silenced. Not dismantled, silenced. It still stands, unmoving, humming quietly beneath its breathless armor. There is a trench somewhere past the broken meridian, where time folds like wet paper. Those who enter lose all sense of identity, language, and chronology, and return speaking only in choruses. Entire units have been swallowed there, and later found, transformed into processions of robed figures, dragging banners made of their own skin, their chants harmonizing across frequencies. The ear cannot hear. The banners change, according to witness accounts. Sometimes they carry prayers, sometimes names, and once, reportedly, the memory of a sunrise that never happened. Field reports speak of icon wounds. Wounds not of flesh, but of meaning. Soldiers struck by nothing at all collapse with holes in their purpose, their very reasons for fighting, unspooled like entrails. Some recover, though never entirely. Others become hollow, shadows that walk, speak, and nod, but whose eyes reflect nothing. These are sometimes absorbed by the ascendant choir, who believe they have been touched by something deeper than comprehension. Curses have begun to infect communications. Encrypted channels echo with fragments of liturgy. No operator recalls transmitting when played in sequence. They sometimes form coherent messages, proclamations of unseen rituals, war hymns in dialects never spoken by the living, or coordinates that point to trench systems that have since vanished. Attempts to follow these signals result in memory loss, spontaneous synchronization of heartbeats, or in rare cases the appearance of angelic glyphs across listening devices. Theologians and codebreakers have formed temporary coalitions to study these broadcasts. The results are inconsistent. Some researchers fall silent mid-sentence and never speak again. Others begin chanting involuntarily. Investigations continue under strict containment protocols, but with each new chorus, the boundaries of interpretation and sanity blur further. And then there are the skies, the clouds, above sectors with confirmed third heaven anomalies pulse in time with battlefield drums. Lightning strikes leave behind psalm scars in the mud, visible only to those who have survived 3 or more near-death experiences. Pilots flying over these regions report vertigo, voices in the cabin, and impossible terrain features. Churches rising from crater lakes, or constellations shaped like bleeding eyes. Some reports align in uncanny detail across units and theaters of war, while others diverge wildly, suggesting either individualized revelation or a phenomenon that reshapes itself according to the witness. Command has yet to issue guidance on whether such sightings are divine, delusional, or both. We do not know where the third heaven is, but we are already inside it, and the song is not done. Chapter 3. Angels of the Mud. They do not descend with trumpets. They do not blaze with glory. Their wings are not woven from light, but stitched from blood-soaked gauze and shredded scripture. They do not dwell in skies, but crawl from the ruins of no man's land, rising from shell holes and shattered cathedrals, like breath exhaled from the wounds of the world. The angels of the mud do not speak. They simply arrive. Their coming is marked not by radiance, but by silence, the kind that falls before something sacred, or before something dies. Voices falter, guns jam, radios stutter into tongues never taught, and then there they are, wings dragging through mire, halos flickering like dying lanterns, eyes too many and too empty. They walk where the living refuse, through gas-choked valleys, across trenches lined with bones, between prayer flags torn by shrapnel. Some leave no footprints, others leave too many. A few leave trails of flowering moss, blooming only where blood was spilled. Witness accounts vary, yet overlap in eerie detail. Soldiers blinded by artillery see them clearly. Deaf men hear them sing. One account speaks of an angel weeping over a ruined chapel, its tears igniting the air like incense fire. Another tells of one kneeling in a crater, feeding birds from a palm made of bone. A third, more chilling, describes an angel walking silently through a barracks at night, stopping at each bunk to trace the forehead of every sleeping soul, half of whom did not wake. They do not save. They do not judge. They do not explain. Soldiers speak of moments where they whispered prayers in the angel's presence, hoping for healing, for mercy, for understanding, only to be met with stillness. What they long for is meaning, some sign that the divine sees and cares. What they receive is silence, vast and unblinking. To the Iron Saints, they are avatars of divine severity. To the Trench Pilgrims, they are signs that the world's pain has been seen. The Black Grail claims they are fallen knowledge, remnants of a war older than creation. The Iron Sultanate warns against looking upon them at all, insisting that to see one is to lose something irretrievable. Their presence warps theology as much as terrain. Scripture has begun to change, subtly, inexplicably. Some chaplains acknowledge the alterations and attempt to incorporate them into evolving liturgies, while others dismiss or suppress such deviations as battlefield delusions or heretical distortions. Among the faithful, fear and reverence are equally common responses. Hymns now include lines that were never written, yet have always been sung. Symbols, long buried, resurface in frescoes, battle standards, and birthmarks. A single angelic visitation is enough to sanctify or doom an entire battalion, and no one knows why. And yet, there are those who pursue them.
Some carry relics in the hope of drawing near. Others mutilate themselves in imitation, binding their arms in wire, sewing scripture into their flesh, fasting until their blood runs clean. There are entire sects now who believe the angels are watching for candidates, and that suffering is the only language they understand.
In some quarters, soldiers are assigned to watch the ground more than the sky. These are called below gazers, volunteers or exiles who remain motionless for days, their eyes fixed on the mud, waiting for halos that flicker just beneath the surface. Their behavior is tolerated, even quietly encouraged by some chaplains, though commanding officers often treat them as liabilities, useful only so long as they remain silent and still. They speak rarely, and when they do, it is often in riddles or fragments of forgotten psalms. Some are found buried to the waist in mire, whispering names no one recognizes, faces pale as icons. Field medics report strange phenomena following angel sightings, wounds sealed with symbols instead of scar tissue, fevers that burn cold, men speaking in voices not their own. There are reports of units achieving impossible victories after an angel passed near their trenches, followed by weeks of silence and amnesia. Others dissolve into chaos, overcome by weeping, religious ecstasy, or ritual self-harm. Command has ceased issuing formal protocols for such events. One trench hymn, forbidden in most battalions, is believed to summon them. Its lyrics vary from camp to camp, but the melody remains the same, a dirge without origin, shared in whispers. Those who sing it claim to feel watched. A few claim to be answered. Fewer still claim to have been touched, though they bear no visible marks, only the changed cadence of their breathing and the uncanny stillness in their eyes. An angel was once seen during the great bombardment of White Morrow. It stood untouched among the flames, its wings absorbing shrapnel like rain, its gaze fixed on the horizon. Every soldier who witnessed it later painted the same image during their psychological evaluations. A blindfolded figure, standing in mud, holding a burning feather in one hand and a rusted key in the other. No explanation has ever been agreed upon. In the ruins of Saint's Gate, a squad of engineers uncovered a chamber carved into the earth, its walls covered in feathers, pressed into stone, its floor etched with concentric circles of soot and salt. At the center stood an angel, motionless, arms raised in silent benediction. The squad did not report it. Instead, they sealed the entrance and built a shrine above it. The shrine remains unmarked on any official map, but candles burn there always. In the Red Halos offensive, where both sides suffered catastrophic losses in a single hour, an angel appeared above the blood-flooded trench lines. Survivors described it not as a being, but as a structure, a living sculpture of wings and chains, rotating in midair, casting shadows that bled upward into the clouds. For 3 minutes, no one moved. Then it vanished, and the air smelled of rust and roses. No one has been able to recreate the event. In the cathedral trenches, long abandoned due to spiritual instability, a term used by chaplains to describe locations where prayer becomes incoherent, relics malfunction, and scripture changes in real time. Patrols have reported the presence of angels simply standing among shattered altars, unblinking and unmoving for hours or days. One report claimed the figures mirrored the posture of the observer, praying when prayed to, turning away when approached. In one tragic instance, a soldier saluted, and the angel returned the gesture. He died 2 days later, smiling and untouched, seated in the exact position he had stood in. Some say the angels are not visitors, but remnants, echoes of a sanctity the world no longer remembers how to hold. Others believe they are messages sent in flesh, the will of a divine source too fractured to be understood. A few hold darker beliefs, that these angels are not from heaven at all, but survivors of something worse, wearing holiness like a mask, so the world won't recognize what truly broke through. Their impact lingers. Places where angels have passed are changed. Water refuses to boil. Mirrors show strangers. The dead rise briefly, just long enough to say one word, often a name no one recognizes, or a fragment of a lost hymn. Chaplains are instructed to record these events, but not interpret them. Interpretation is left to the theologians or the man. One field report, suppressed but leaked through the ghost choir's archives, describes an angel appearing inside a command bunker during an artillery blackout. The lights failed. The air thickened with smoke that smelled of myrrh and rust. When visibility returned, the map table had changed, rearranged into a circle with new coordinates marked in crimson ink. Those who followed them found a crater filled with teeth and singing mud. Another tale, still debated in certain seminaries, involves an angel standing at the border of a mass grave, head bowed. For 3 days it stood there unmoving, even as rain collapsed the trenches around it. On the 4th morning, the corpses had vanished. In their place, a garden of pale flowers, spelling out a single phrase, I remember. The garden was said to persist for several weeks, untouched by shelling or scavengers, before vanishing overnight. Whether it still exists in some hidden corner of the front, or faded like a dream upon waking, No one can say. Pilgrims still search for it. They do not stay. They do not speak. They do not bow to prayer. But neither do they flee from it. They appear in times of crisis, of collapse, of quiet, and of noise, sometimes alone, sometimes in threes. Once, reportedly, in a procession of 7, marching beneath a sky that turned black at midday. The angels of the mud do not descend from heaven. They rise from the grave of it, and they are watching.
Always watching.
Chapter 4. Demons of Doctrine. They do not come from beneath. They bleed in from the edges, from the torn margins of Scripture, from corrupted footnotes, from prayers uttered in doubt or desperation. Demons in Trench Crusade are not creatures of flame or brimstone, but of distortion, faith twisted inward until it breaks. This interpretation, drawn from field reports and debated theological writings, is common among battlefield chaplains and archivists, though not formally codified in doctrine. They emerge not with fire, but with silence that mocks the sacred. Their forms are unstable, stitched together from discarded symbols and devoured sermons. Where angels evoke awe, demons demand interpretation, and every interpretation fractures further. They appear in times of crisis, not to tempt, but to teach lessons no one asked for. A demon may show a chaplain the face of a forgotten saint, performing unspeakable acts. It may grant a miracle that solves nothing, or offer a vision of heaven so perfect it drives the viewer to madness. These are not teachings meant to edify. They are revelations meant to break certainty, lessons in contradiction, in blasphemy, in the unbearable weight of meaning. A demon is not a singular thing. It is the manifestation of a theological failure, a sermon misquoted too many times, a doctrine weaponized against its believers, a saint misremembered until they become a curse. They are shaped by heresy, fed by belief, and born from the soul's inability to reconcile paradox. The most feared among them are the living scolia, entities composed entirely of words. Their bodies writhe with shifting texts, skin covered in mutating scripture. They do not speak, yet their presence forces sermons into the mouths of the unwilling. One report tells of a platoon that encountered a living scolia during a midnight patrol. They returned at dawn, mute and covered in ink, mouths sewn shut with verses in languages no one had ever recorded. Another category are the confessors unmade. These demons take the form of twisted clergy, faces featureless, vestments soaked in ink and oil. They appear before lone soldiers and demand confession, not of sins, but of doubts. Those who resist are left untouched. Those who speak find their memories rewritten, doubts amplified, faith distorted until it devours them from within. Demons are not merely fought, they are negotiated with, feared, recorded, and in some cases worshipped. The cult of the wounded gospel believes demons are the soul's immune response to corrupted faith, sent to cauterize falsehood with holy suffering. Others see them as the last true angels, those who refuse to pretend the war still makes sense. Some demons are silent archivists. They appear in the aftermath of battles, walking untouched among the fallen, inscribing the dead with symbols that glow briefly before fading. Their presence is said to sanctify or erase memory, depending on who observes. One medic claimed that, after watching a demon mark his captain's chest, he could no longer remember the captain's face, but could recall in perfect detail every word of his final prayer. There are demons who take root rather than appear. These are known as the cataclysmic burdens. They do not walk, fly, or speak. They grow in places of great spiritual contradiction. Trenches used as altars, battlefields where both sides claimed divine favor. These demons are not beings, but infestations of belief. Men who dwell too long in such places begin to echo their surroundings. They repeat mantras they were never taught. They begin to bleed in patterns. They bury their weapons and dig with their hands. Traplanes fear the burdens most of all, for they are subtle. They do not arrive, they emerge, slowly, from within. The doctrine of opposition states that for every holy revelation, a mirrored falsehood must exist. Though widely studied, it is not universally accepted. Some orders reject it as dangerous heresy, while others, especially within the scholiasts and wounded gospel cults, treat it as foundational truth. This is not metaphor. It is law. Demons are not only tolerated by faith, they are required to believe in the divine, is inherently to summon its opposite. The deeper the belief, the more fertile the soil for contradiction, and the war has tilled the earth well. Some orders claim to imprison demons for study, vaults carved from consecrated obsidian, guarded by the silent rejoicers, warriors who have had their eyes and tongues removed to avoid corruption. It is whispered that the demons inside do not howl or shriek, but whisper doctrine backwards, causing sickness in those who listen too long. Maps drawn of these vaults consistently change. One vault was found to contain only mirrors. Another held nothing, yet anyone who entered forgot why they came. The demonic concordance, a forbidden manuscript, maintained by the Ghost Choir, catalogs 7077 named demons. No two entries are the same length. Some are single words, others span dozens of pages. One entry is entirely blank, and it is the most feared. Scholars speculate that the absence itself is the horror, that a demon so vast or pure in contradiction cannot be described, only avoided. Others whisper that the blankness is a trap, a conceptual void that consumes understanding the moment it is named. Some even believe the demon is still being written by everyone who reads the concordance. Field encounters remain difficult to verify. A demon in Sector Y still reportedly rewrote the concept of gravity in a 2,000-meter radius, causing rifles to float and blood to fall upward. In Trench Delta Basilica, a supply unit claimed to pass through a tunnel lined with inverted sermons carved into the walls. At its center stood a pulpit, empty save for a single page that could not be touched, only read aloud once. All who did so suffered spontaneous stigmata and spoke only in mirrored speech until death. Another phenomenon, reported in whispered fragments, involves the schematic veil, a thin layer of mist that rolls across certain battlefields just before a doctrinal collapse. It hums with fractured hymns, indistinct but oddly familiar. Soldiers caught within often return changed, Some speak in parables they never learned. Others weep until their voices shatter. One commander attempted to harness the veil for strategic advantage. His troops turned on each other within minutes, quoting scripture as they slaughtered comrades. There are demons who imitate saints. These impostors wear the likenesses of canonized martyrs, performing miracles that leave behind no healing, only belief. They draw followers, inspire visions, lead processions through cursed grounds. Their worship is often sincere, and by the time the deception is revealed, it is too late. Entire cults have formed around such apparitions, convinced they follow the righteous path, even as they rot from within. Occasionally, a demon will adopt no form at all. It will inhabit a question. Chaplains refer to these as seed thoughts and treat them as spiritual contagions. There are no effective rites for purging them, only isolation, distraction, or in extreme cases sanctioned amnesia through ritual forgetting. Theologians debate whether these thoughts are genuinely demonic or merely the natural consequence of faith stretched to its limit. A single query whispered during prayer, one that grows and festers with each repetition. What if we were wrong? What if the war was never holy? What if the silence is the answer? These questions spread like infection. Chaplains call them seed thoughts. The afflicted often show no symptoms until they renounce all names for the divine and walk willingly into enemy fire. A rare and particularly dangerous manifestation is the heretic echo. It is not a being, but a loop of words, of doctrine, of memory. It infects liturgies, rewriting sacred phrases. Subtly, then more overtly, congregations begin to chant a version of truth, just slightly altered over time. They begin to forget the difference. One field temple recited a corrupted creed for 40 days before realizing its prayers had invoked not protection, but invitation. What answered was not seen, only heard. Entire trenches have been lost to echo contamination. The affected repeat the same sermons in exact unison, weep at the same intervals, and bleed in symmetrical patterns. Attempts to intervene fail. Attempts to replicate the effect fail harder. Even recorded footage warps. The echoes do not want to be understood. They want to be followed. They are not hunted. They are not cleansed. They are tolerated, sometimes even invited. Their purpose is not always destruction, but understanding by force, if necessary. And so, in the war's darkest places, soldiers dig trenches in loops. They build chapels with no doors. They carry scrolls wrapped in chains. They light candles not for the divine, but to better see what emerges when doctrine fails. Demons do not tempt. They reveal, and when they are done, there is only silence. Not peace, not absence, just silence, and the sound of pages turning. They are here, and they are listening. Chapter 5. The Schism in the Sky. It began with the splitting of a cloud, not by wind nor weather, but by will. A slow, deliberate rupture above a battlefield already silent from too much death. Witnesses say the sky opened like old scripture, torn at the seams by a hand no one could see. Some describe seeing glyphs, Verses or illuminated patterns written across the torn sky, symbols that resembled sacred texts, but shifted too quickly to be read. Others insist the comparison was metaphorical, a desperate attempt to make sense of the impossible. What lay beyond was not sky at all, but an absence so vast and still, it made even angels retreat. The schism is not a storm. It does not move. It does not speak. It's simply a wound above the world, visible only to those who have lost something sacred. No instruments can measure it. Photographs, taken beneath its gaze, return blank. Messages sent through it return altered. What few images remain are hand-drawn renderings by soldiers who died within hours of completing them. Skies shaded in black ink so dense it bleeds through the page. Some say the schism is a doorway. Others claim it is a scar left by a failed ascension. The moment heaven itself tried to leave, there are whispers that it is not above us at all, but a reflection of a deeper break, one in the structure of belief, the vault of theology shattered from within. The ground beneath this schism is wrong. Compass needles spiral without direction, though not consistently. Some soldiers report normal function until a certain proximity is crossed. Others suggest the anomalies depend not just on distance, but on the strength or clarity of belief. Chaplains often find that the more devout the witness, the more severe the distortion. Gravity loosens its grip. Words spoken aloud often repeat themselves. Doctrine fails to function. Rituals collapse into gibberish. According to unverified field reports, a sermon delivered in the schism's shadow becomes a confession before it ends. Entire units have vanished beneath its umbra. Others, it is said, return changed, silent, inverted, mouthing hymns in reverse. Their eyes reflect not light, but text. They do not sleep. They do not blink. They stare upward, waiting for something no one else can see. Above them, the sky does not move. It waits, and it remembers what it once held. The cult of the Hollow Vault, a sect mentioned only in fragmented transmissions, is regarded with quiet dread by most factions. Few attempt to engage them, and their rights are largely left unchallenged, not out of respect, but because those who try rarely return unchanged, gathers beneath the schism. They believe it is the original wound from which all divine contradiction spills. They reportedly build towers of silence, structures without entrances, made of bones and ash. No one knows how they climb them. No one sees them descend. According to members of the Ghost Choir, the schism has a frequency, not of sound but of rhythm, buried in the wind, in the heartbeat, in the rising of smoke. They have attempted to transcribe its silence using mirrored instruments, songbooks written backward, and choirs trained to sing in dreams. So far, these efforts remain unproven, but one unconfirmed event in Sector Sant beneath describes the sky responding. 3 notes, sung by thunder, that made the ground tremble and turned every candle blue. Pilots report disorientation and memory loss when flying near the rift. As a result, certain flight paths have been restricted, though some commanders still authorize reconnaissance missions out of desperation or devotion. Chaplains seeing against air passage through the schism's shadow, yet such warnings are inconsistently enforced. The risks are acknowledged, but not always avoided. One squadron allegedly looped the same circular path for 6 hours, believing they were traveling straight. Upon return, their flight logs had rewritten themselves, filled with coordinates that led to dead relic zones. The pilots reportedly no longer speak. They hem low and constant, as though remembering a song only they can hear. A trench chaplain once attempted to preach beneath the schism. His sermon began with fire and ended in weeping. He later claimed the words he spoke were not his own. According to his account, the pages of his scripture had rewritten themselves during the night. New passages, familiar in tone, but etched in a language only the dying could understand. His congregation dispersed. Some dug into the earth, others walked into the fog. A few stood and stared upward until their eyes calcified. These details remain unverified. The sky above the schism is always the same shade of bruised gray. No matter the hour, it is rumored that time resists itself there. Watches reportedly tick backward. Wounds refuse to close or reopen. Along new lines, some claim that if you sleep beneath the schism, you will dream of prayers you never learned and wake up knowing their cost. Some believe the schism is a response that something looked upon this war and turned away so violently it tore heaven in half. Others claim it is a beginning, an aperture waiting for the right ritual, the right voice, the right silence. A few cults dig beneath it, convinced the wound extends through all layers of the world. None of this is confirmed. There are whispered reports of structures emerging from the schism's lightless center, spires that shimmer and vanish, cathedrals suspended in impossible angles, icons that seem to observe rather than be observed. These sightings are inconsistent and unverifiable, often dismissed as mass hallucination or divine misdirection. Yet the drawings recur across multiple war zones, even among those who have never seen the schism. An unconfirmed transmission intercepted by the voice beneath claimed that a name had been spoken within the schism, not aloud, but to the minds of those standing beneath it, a name older than war, a name not meant to be known. The soldiers who received the message reportedly tore out their own tongues, then arranged themselves in the shape of its syllables. In rare cases, the schism reportedly weeps. Dark droplets fall upward, rising into the breach rather than descending. Anything touched by these tears calcifies, stone, flesh, even air, frozen into delicate lattices, shaped like letters from forgotten alphabets. Samples retrieved from such sites crumble when exposed to sunlight, and attempts to preserve them fail. But for the moments they exist, the air hums with a resonance many describe as mournful. One account, recorded only in fragments and banned by several chaplaincies, describes a ritual conducted directly beneath the schism. No official unit admits participation. The rite reportedly involved a procession of 13 monks, the burning of inverted gospels, and the sacrifice of a mirror. What followed was silence, total and unrelenting. For 3 days, no birds flew overhead, no engines functioned, and no soldier dreamed. A lesser-known phenomenon, referred to only as the Sky Veil incident, allegedly occurred during a full eclipse over a trench monastery. During the eclipse, the schism did not darken, but flared white, illuminating underground tunnels and trench networks that had never been mapped. For 31 minutes, the soldiers reported moving freely through walls, speaking fluently in unknown dialects, and perceiving multiple timelines simultaneously. When the light receded, half the monastery had vanished, and the survivors refused to speak of what they saw. Some archivists, those few who still study the heretical geometry of divine collapse, speculate that the schism may be the first event in reverse, that what hangs above is not a rupture, but a recursion, a wound that folds back on creation, undoing belief by remembering it too clearly. Among the more unsettling rumors is the appearance of inverted rainbows above the schism bands, of color moving inward rather than outward, visible only through fractured glass or water blessed during a saint's death. These inverted arcs are said to sing when observed directly. One trench medic claimed his reflection disappeared permanently after glimpsing one in a water basin. There are whispered fears that the schism is growing not only in size, but in intent. Such a possibility carries consequences beyond doctrine. Commanders have begun to redraw front lines to avoid its shadow, while chaplains conduct sermons with increasing hesitation, fearing that every prayer might be heard too clearly. Morale wavers, not from defeat, but from the sense that the sky itself is listening and remembering. Some theologians speculate, cautiously and in private, that the schism may be learning, that it watches those who gaze too long, that it remembers every prayer whispered beneath it, that it is not just a wound, but a listener. It is said that the schism has never moved, it has only grown. What all agree on is this: nothing that passes beneath the schism is unchanged.
Not flesh.
Not thought.
Not faith, and least of all, the sky. Chapter 6: Miracles and Curses. In the world of Trench Crusade, there is no clean division between miracle and curse. They are not opposites, they are reflections, two faces of the same sanctified blade, wielded without explanation or mercy. A miracle is not always a blessing. A curse is not always a punishment. Both are phenomena that rupture the expected order of flesh, faith, and time. Both are signs. Both are warnings. Some occur in silence, others with weeping. A few arrive singing. Field reports tell of soldiers whose blood transformed into scripture mid-battle. Some chaplains interpret the event as a divine inscription, proof of a soldier's chosen role in a holy narrative, while others view it as a warning, a physical manifestation of overwhelming spiritual pressure. Commanders are split in response. A few reassign the afflicted to ceremonial duties, while others treat them as liabilities or omens of battlefield disruption. The wounds they suffered wrote sermons into the mud. Others stood untouched in hails of gunfire, only to be found weeping afterward, muttering that they could feel every bullet, just not as pain. There are records of trenches healed overnight, collapsed walls risen as if rebuilt by unseen hands. But inside, the air is thick with incense and memory, and every sound echoes with a delay, as though reality itself is hesitating. Unexplained survivals are common. Soldiers buried for days emerge hungry but unharmed. Whole battalions vanish from doomed offensives, only to reappear elsewhere, dazed, praying in languages older than their flags. Chaplains debate whether these are divine interventions or acts of something more cunning. The Iron Saints classify such survivals as sanctioned miracles, while the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent denounces them as blasphemous anomalies. Other factions remain silent, wary of declaring anything divine that defies pattern or doctrine. Not all miracles preserve. Some exalt. Witnesses speak of levitating bodies, eyes aflame with unknown light, a man who burned for an hour without ash, a woman whose voice turned to bells during her last rites, causing every flower in the graveyard to bloom and die in the same moment. There are miracles of terror too. Cities where time stops at dusk and resumes at dawn. Only no one inside can remember what occurred. Trenches where no one ages. Commanders who bleed relics instead of blood. Infants born chanting holy doctrine only to dissolve before their second breath. These events are recorded, studied, and named, but they are never explained. Some say miracles are the fingerprints of angels. Others whisper they are symptoms of a world unraveling. And curses are simply the miracles we survive long enough to name. Among the confirmed phenomena catalogued by the Ghost Choir is the phenomenon known as the Singing Scar. A trench near the meridian line reportedly hums continuously, especially at night, in a tone that mirrors the prayers of the soldiers stationed there. Attempts to silence the sound fail, and any soldier who hums in harmony with the tone reportedly experiences vivid visions of battles that have not yet occurred. Another confirmed occurrence is the rain of icons, small metallic objects in the shape of saints and relics that fall from the sky during certain ritual offensives. The rain is warm and smells of oil and myrrh. Some soldiers collect the icons, believing they grant temporary immunity to spiritual corruption. Others bury them on the spot, whispering that they are warnings, not gifts. The Iron Saints document a miracle referred to as the burning baptism. It occurs spontaneously in sacred zones, where a chosen soldier is wreathed in blue flame during Mass. The fire never burns flesh, only cloth and metal. Survivors of the baptism are revered, though many do not speak again. Their tongues are often found marked with a new language, unrecognized by any current faith. For some units, the event inspires profound reverence and unity, proof of divine selection. For others, it spreads unease, as if the soldier has become something other than human. It occurs spontaneously in sacred zones, where a chosen soldier is wreathed in blue flame during Mass. The fire never burns flesh, only cloth and metal. Survivors of the baptism are revered, though many do not speak again. Their tongues are often found marked with a new language, unrecognized by any current faith. Chaplains speak in hushed tones of the Pale Host, a battalion presumed lost, who reportedly marches only on nights of eclipse. Sightings vary, but descriptions remain eerily similar. Pale soldiers walking in formation, bearing relic banners, and whispering liturgies that unnerve even the most devout. Some say they are the dead, brought back through faith. Others believe they were never dead to begin with, only caught in a prayer so powerful it severed them from time. A number of phenomena remain unconfirmed and are clearly speculative, passed between trenches as cautionary myths. One such story tells of the Saint's Hollow, a shell crater where any soldier who falls asleep awakens. Change their eyes reflect candlelight even in darkness, and their shadow bends toward crosses. No record confirms this, but the crater remains unoccupied. Another tale, whispered by battlefield scribes, speaks of the scrollskin, a man whose entire body was covered in scripture from head to toe, not tattooed, but growing like veins beneath the skin. He walked barefoot across no man's land, unaffected by shrapnel or flame. When he was finally brought to rest, his body burned away, but the ground beneath him remained warm for 7 days. A less common but recurring account, though never officially confirmed, tells of the weeping flag, a regimental banner that began to leak blood during a mass burial. The flag never dried. It was folded and sealed in an ossuary, but the stone around it continues to weep. Decades later, some veterans claim the flag weeps only when a lie is told in its shadow. Another rumored miracle, referred to by name only in forbidden chaplain scrolls, is the harrowing kiss, said to occur only once every few years. It begins when a soldier sees a veiled figure in their dream, reaches to embrace it, and wakes with lips branded by a sigil of burning scripture. Those marked are both feared and revered. Some are treated as battlefield prophets and protected by their units. Others are abandoned or exiled, regarded as cursed emissaries of something beyond comprehension. The harrowing kiss is sought by a few fringe zealots, but most pray they are never chosen. Said to occur only once every few years, it begins when a soldier sees a veiled figure in their dream, reaches to embrace it, and wakes with lips branded by a sigil of burning scripture. Those marked are both feared and revered. Some become battlefield prophets, others vanish completely. According to Trench legends, there is a tree that grows only from the remains of those martyred in heretical states, referred to as the gallows psalm. This tree reportedly sings with a hollow voice when the wind strikes its branches, repeating the last prayers of those buried at its roots. The church denies its existence, but multiple sketchbooks recovered from the front depict identical silhouettes of its warped, leafless frame. There is also mention, always tentative, never confirmed, of the broken veil, a region where miracles and curses occur in rapid succession, with no distinction between the two. Soldiers stationed there experience conflicting realities. Some die before being wounded, others report being healed only after death. A commander once described the area as a trench dug across God's second thought. A particularly unsettling legend, whispered only among the older chaplains, concerns the phenomenon known as the quiet wake. It is said to occur after a miraculous survival, when a soldier returns from certain death untouched, bearing no wounds and no memory. Within 7 days, everyone who knew the soldier intimately dies in unrelated and often grotesque ways. The soldier is left utterly alone, marked not by stigma but by absence. Entire squads reportedly refused to speak to such individuals, calling them echo saints, and in a single disputed field note, scrawled in the margins of a devotional ledger, and never officially archived, a soldier writes of a trench where miracles were requested by name, where prayer was transactional and answered instantly, but each answered prayer was followed by silence, and each miracle by isolation. I got my brother back, the note reads, but he won't look at me, he just listens, and the ground where he walks forgets our names. Some who interpret the note believe the brother returned hollow, stripped of memory or meaning, animated by something divine, but devoid of self. Others say he was never the same, because he remembered too much in the margins of a devotional ledger, and never officially archived. A soldier writes of a trench where miracles were requested by name, where prayer was transactional and answered instantly, but each answered prayer was followed by silence, and each miracle by isolation. I got my brother back, the note reads, but he won't look at me, he just listens, and the ground where he walks forgets our names. These stories are not found in canon scripture. They are oral relics, half caution, half devotion. And so the line between miracle and curse blurs further. Some kill, some preserve, some change only what cannot be seen, but all leave a mark. Not every miracle is good. Not every curse is evil. In Trench Crusade, the sacred is not safe, and the divine is not kind. Chapter 7. Inhuman Witnesses. Not all who walk the trenches are men. Not all who kneel in prayer are faithful. And not all who watch this endless war do so with eyes.
There are witnesses older than language, shapes in the fog, silhouettes glimpsed through veils of ash and blood. They do not intervene. They do not bless. They only watch. Some soldiers find this gaze oddly comforting, as if their suffering is not entirely unseen. Others are unmoored by it, haunted by the knowledge that they are being studied, not saved. In the silence of the trenches, being observed without explanation is both a benediction and a curse.
Some call them the silent choir. Others refer to them simply as the inhuman, but none can say what they are or why they come. They leave no footprints. They cast no shadows, and yet across every front they are seen. Their presence is often followed by paradox. Weapons jam without cause. Relics bleed salt. Maps erase themselves. The squad's memories fracture, sometimes permanently. Each soldier recalling a different route, a different order, a different ending. In rare cases, memory slowly returns over days or weeks, but more often the fractures remain, unhealed and unshared, leaving units disoriented and isolated even among comrades. Each soldier recalling a different route, a different order, a different ending. In official doctrine, they are unacknowledged. Their existence is filed beneath anomalies, visions, and battlefield trauma. But among the archivists, the record keepers, and the watchers who have seen too much, their appearances are tracked with obsessive care. They are not demons, nor angels, nor saints. They are not of faith or heresy. They belong to no theology, and yet they move as if by ritual. They arrive when the veil is thin, when silence falls too fast. The veil, say some chaplains, is most fragile during mass deaths, after failed rituals, or in places where too many prayers have gone unanswered. Geography too plays a role. Certain trenches, once sites of sanctified relics or forgotten massacres, are believed to thin reality by their very presence. When the world hesitates between heartbeat and breath, they have been seen standing over the dying, kneeling beside relics that have not yet been found, marking the ground in patterns no one can decipher. They are the witnesses, and wherever they are, they remember everything. Confirmed sightings are scarce, but some have been verified by multiple sources. One such case occurred in the ruins of the Chapel of Broken Dawn, which later drew the attention of multiple archivist sects and cartographic cults. The spiral pattern left in the chapel's foundation became a site of quiet pilgrimage, though no official doctrine acknowledged its sanctity. Some claimed the spiral mirrored the forgotten glyphs of pre-divergence prophecy, while others insisted it was a wound in the earth, a scar of unrecorded memory, where an entire platoon reported the appearance of 3 tall figures cloaked in veils of shifting light. The figures stood motionless for 6 hours, untouched by fire or shrapnel. When the battle ended, the chapel's foundation had rearranged itself into a spiral. The men who witnessed it could no longer pronounce their own names. Another verified instance took place during the Battle of Saints Divide, when a sniper's scope caught the image of a translucent figure walking across no man's land. The figure made no sound, but the moment it passed, all weapons in the sector malfunctioned simultaneously. The figure turned once, as if to acknowledge the soldier watching. That single gesture, that impossible recognition, shattered something deep within him. From that moment on, the sniper could no longer bear to be seen, not by comrades, not by mirrors, not even by his own memory. It was not fear that drove him mad, but the certainty that something beyond comprehension had looked back. The sniper was later found scribbling endlessly on his trench walls, circles within circles, all identical, all perfect. The Inhuman are not bound by space. Soldiers report glimpsing them far across the battlefield, only to find them suddenly near, as if distance means nothing to their kind. They often vanish mid-glance. Some appear only in mirrors, others are seen only by the dying. What purpose they serve, if any, is unknown. They do not speak, they do not interact, but those who have seen them describe a sensation that transcends fear, the feeling of being remembered by something that has never forgotten anything. Some fringe theologians believe they are not witnesses at all, but memories given form, reverberations of all that has been believed, all that has been suffered, shapes pressed into the fabric of war by the weight of endless faith and pain. Others, particularly certain fringe theologians, disillusioned chaplains, and veteran seers, say they are what comes after angels and demons, what remains when even paradox dies, and a few whisper that they do not witness the war at all. But the end of it, unconfirmed accounts, pass between foxholes and whispered through gas mask filters, speak of the onyx shepherd, a towering figure whose presence is always preceded by a sudden stillness in the mud. Witnesses describe it as wearing no garments, but rather composed of flowing black matter, constantly folding inward like a cloak of ink. It carries no weapon, it leaves no marks, but those who look upon it weep uncontrollably, not in fear, but recognition. It is said the shepherd walks only during ceasefires, as if to audit the war's silence. Another legend speaks of the glance eternal, a phenomenon wherein a soldier glimpses a figure only once, but spends the rest of their life convinced it is still watching them. Mirrors fog, glass shatters, reflections appear just out of sync. Veterans affected by the glance often isolate themselves, claiming they can no longer be trusted to sleep among the living. It watches through memory, one wrote, and memory never sleeps. Archivists have attempted to classify these beings, but their categories dissolve with every new encounter. Some are described as genderless silhouettes, others as crowned statues that blink when no one looks. One report, since dismissed by official channels, claimed that a figure of impossible geometry was seen praying in reverse, time bending backward around its bowed head. There are drawings, smuggled from abandoned chaplaincy outposts, of witness figures standing among soldiers without being noticed. They are depicted as slightly taller than human, with eyes like hollow suns. Some hold candles that do not burn. Others raise their hands in gestures that resemble both blessing and surrender. Whatever they are, their presence endures. Theologians cannot agree on their nature. Saints do not mention them. Heretics refuse to claim them. Yet soldiers see them again and again.
They are the record that cannot be erased. Among those who encounter them, this is both blessing and terror. Some revere the inhuman as divine archivists, silent saints who will remember their sacrifice when no one else can. Others fear them as omens of eternal recurrence, proof that nothing, not even pain, will ever truly be forgotten. To be seen by them is to be etched into something vast and unfeeling, where memory outlives meaning.
And perhaps the final audience to a war that no longer knows how to end. Some claim these beings only appear when a war prayer is interrupted mid-recitation, that their presence is summoned not by faith but by rupture, by the breaking of belief in the moment it is voiced. A chaplain's journal, never published, details a mass interrupted by artillery. As the faithful scattered, the priest reportedly saw a pale figure take the pulpit, finish the prayer in silence, and vanish. The altar never dried. A handful of fringe cults have sprung up around the idea that the inhuman witnesses are archivists in the truest sense, divine observers sent not to judge, but to remember. These groups practice rituals of pure observation, long hours spent watching candlelight, reenactments of remembered deaths, and the recitation of known lies. They believe this makes them visible to the witnesses. They believe the inhuman do not fear godlessness, but forgetfulness. For these cults, memory is the highest sacrament. To recall is to revere, and to forget is to sin. They perform ceremonies of recollection, reciting the names of the dead and the moments of loss in ritual cadence, believing each act of remembrance draws the inhuman closer. To remember, they say, is to keep the war from vanishing into myth, and to prove that nothing suffered was in vain. It is whispered that some battlefield relics are not forged by saints, but by these watchers, that they are not gifts, but recordings, moments pressed into form, a torn glove that never rots, a bullet that hums only when held by the one who fired it, a mask with no eye holes that fits perfectly over any face. These items, when catalogued, are labeled anemetic, pertaining to memory, not matter. A lesser-known trench myth tells of a child seen wandering just behind the front lines, barefoot and clothed in mourning rags, her face always turned away. She carries a jar filled with whispers. Those who claim to have followed her say they began to hear voices from their own past, speaking of choices never made. Whether she is an inhuman witness or something else entirely is unknown, but every sighting ends the same way. The jar is shattered, and no one remembers why they began to follow her. Another tale, likely apocryphal, speaks of a moment during a total eclipse when 100 witness figures stood in formation along the ridge of a dead zone. They did nothing. They said nothing. They only turned to face the sun as it vanished. When the light returned, they were gone, and the trenches beneath the ridge had become mirrors, perfect, shallow mirrors filled with still water that no one dared disturb. Inhuman weaknesses may not serve faith, but they serve memory, and in this endless war, memory is the only thing that does not bleed. Chapter 8. Divine Lies and Sacred Madness. Faith is not stable in the trenches. It does not ascend. It unravels. Where once devotion gave structure, now it gives way to spirals. Where once dogma brought clarity, now it breaks into riddles. Saints are still named, but their prayers echo with contradictions. Scriptures still circulate, but no two copies agree. The war has lasted too long, not just in time, but in belief. Belief itself has become a battlefield, doctrines bent into paradoxes, truths repeated until they contradict, and rituals stretched until they snap. It is not just the endurance of faith that's been tested, but its shape, its integrity, and its purpose. What once gave meaning now unravels meaning. What once brought unity now breeds fracture, and belief, stretched thin across the broken body of the world, begins to tear. This is the chapter of holy fracture, of miracles that lie, of revelations that contradict, of martyrs who rise wrong, of faith that devours itself. They call it sacred madness, not as metaphor, but condition. Theologians, afflicted with prophetic visions, but loop endlessly. Chaplains, whose sermons cause auditory hallucinations. Acolytes, whose relics bleed in denial of the truths they speak. The blessed begin to contradict themselves. Saints issue incompatible miracles. Angels speak in tongues that damn as often as they save. And everywhere, the faithful left to reconcile impossibilities. They cannot survive. This is not heresy. Heresy assumes deviation. This is something worse. This is faith's own entropy. One confirmed example is the Book of the Echoed Flame, a relic scripture known to duplicate itself every time it is read aloud in full. However, the new copy always omits a different passage, an omission that seems random at first, but upon comparison, forms a separate, inverted gospel. Both books remain warm to the touch. Both are considered authentic. Both are now used in separate mass rites by opposing battalions of the same faith. Each believes their version to be the true gospel, wholly unaware or willfully dismissive of the other's existence. The contradiction is not reconciled, but sanctified through ritual, as if certainty were more vital than truth. There is the phenomenon of twin testimonies, two saints canonized during the same year, both claiming divine visions of the same event, but with completely opposite interpretations. One described a future where all flesh was transfigured into light, the other where light curdled into burn, and belief became devourable. Both saints were said to glow with the same divine radiance. Both are worshipped by different sects, neither acknowledging the other. Pilgrims speak of shrines that change their inscriptions, depending on who kneels before them. One prayer wall near the Shard Cathedral reportedly weeps blood for the penitent, but drips ink for the proud. The ink forms verses not found in any recorded scripture, but rhymes perfectly with three-band creeds. A relic known as the candle of the unseen is said to flicker in response to falsehood. However, when exposed to multiple conflicting truths, spoken simultaneously, it reportedly burns with a blue flame and begins to hum. Witnesses claim the sound is the voice of a forgotten god, asking a question no one can understand. Acolytes who remain near the candle too long begin answering it anyway. These fractures accumulate. Faith, no longer singular, refracts into uncountable denominations. The rite of ascendant flame, once a unifying ritual, performed across three major fronts, now exists in dozens of irreconcilable forms, some demanding silence, others invoking screams, some using relic ash, others burning faith tithes in bronze vessels. No two forms agree, yet each is declared sacred. Chaplains either adapt or are discarded, many of them mutually exclusive, yet equally divine. Chaplains as fragments, rites overlap until they cancel themselves out. Scripture is now interpreted, not by consensus, but by combat. Some say this is the will of the divine, to test the faithful by forcing them to choose which contradiction they can endure. Others whisper, it is not divine at all, but the result of the war itself, its endless churn, rendering belief into madness, until the very act of worship becomes an affliction. Unconfirmed trench myths speak of the psalm without name, a whispered litany that has no origin, passed mouth to mouth across the front. No one knows who first spoke it, or in what tongue. It is said to alter slightly each time it's repeated, yet always returns to a single refrain. He who is both ends listens between. Chaplains who hear it experience seizures. One awoke speaking perfect scripture in reverse order, beginning with apocalypse and ending with creation. There are reports of sacred hallucinations spreading between soldiers, as if contagious, entire squads falling into the same dream, reporting identical visions of an inverted cathedral beneath the mud, where saints wear their martyrdom inside out and sing hymns made of bird song and burn. These visions have varying effects. Some units become eerily synchronized, speaking in shared phrases or fighting with near-perfect coordination. Others fracture under the pressure, each soldier convinced they have glimpsed a different, incompatible revelation. Commanders often suppress reports of shared hallucinations, fearing both mass hysteria and dangerous spiritual cohesion, as if contagious. Entire squads falling into the same dream, reporting identical visions of an inverted beneath the mud, where saints wear their martyrdom inside out and sing hymns made of bird song and burn. Some relics now resist translation. Texts etched into their surfaces twist. When transcribed, words reshuffling as the ink dries. The result is not gibberish, but doctrine in a language no one has taught and everyone understands. Those who read it often burn their own Bibles afterward, claiming they finally see the lie, but never say what it was. More and more often, the divine appears, not as salvation, but as recursion. Prayers that end where they begin, rites that undo themselves if spoken in the wrong cadence, visions that show not heaven, but the moment before belief, and always the same question beneath it all, unspoken but undeniable. What if the gods have gone mad before we did? Some sects have begun drafting treatises of unfaith rituals to forget the divine, prayers designed to erase rather than glorify. These liturgies are constructed not to banish gods, but to cleanse the soul of their presence entirely. One such rite, the benediction of blind grace, instructs its followers to light candles for saints they do not believe in, and speak their names backward until nothing feels holy anymore. Theological commandos, once sent to exercise battlefield anomalies, now return with relics that seem to argue with each other. A chalice that boils any sanctified wine placed within it, a cruciform that reorients itself to face away from worshippers, a rosary whose beads count upward to infinity. Even martyrdom, once a symbol of clarity, has begun to splinter. There are now reports of triple martyrs, individuals who have died, risen, and died again, each time claiming a different revelation. Their bodies are incorrupt, but their stories shift. Religious authorities are divided in response. Some canonize these figures as messengers of divine evolution, while others shun or erase them from doctrine entirely, fearing they represent a failure of theological control rather than a sign of holy progression. Entire gospels have been based on each of their deaths, none of which match. There are now reports of triple martyrs, individuals who have died, risen, and died again, each time claiming a different revelation. Their bodies are incorrupt, but their stories shift. Entire gospels have been based on each of their deaths, none of which match. It is whispered that some war zones have become sentient prayers, battles fought not to win, but to invoke, trenches dug in the shape of forgotten glyphs, barrages timed to echo old sermons, officers promoted not for tactics, but for dreams, and somewhere beneath it all, the memory of a vow no one remembers making. In the deepest crypts of the faith mechanica, a sealed reliquary is said to contain a fractured homily that recites itself only when no one is listening. It speaks in tones that rust metal and soften glass. The machine priests guarding it do not worship it, they endure it. When asked why they continue to keep it, their response is always the same: it is not ours to silence. Some believe the final miracle will be madness made whole, that from the shattered doctrines, something unified may emerge, not clean, not kind, but complete. Others dread this idea. They say that the only thing worse than a world without belief is one where all belief is true at once. And so the war preys on, one contradiction at a time, a faith that folds in on itself like a trench map rewritten by madness, and beneath it all a silence, not from lack of belief, but from too much faith, layered too long, too many prayers, stacked without answer, too many gods, none of them sure who they are anymore. We have walked among angels who do not save. We have knelt in the presence of demons who do not speak. We have heard the songs that pierce silence and witnessed the prayers that devour the faithful. And still, the trenches remain. In episode 7, we have traced the edges of the unknowable witnesses, inhuman and unseen. We have mapped the shape of madness and the mouth of divinity. We have watched saints collapse into paradox, relics rewrite their own gospels, and gods lose the names that once held them together. This is not the story of one belief, or even many. It is the sound of belief fracturing beneath its own weight, of angels who forget what they were made for, of prayers returned unopened, of rituals performed not to remember, but to be remembered by something older than history. The war continues, and in its echo, so do the watchers. Whatever walks above the trenches no longer shines, and whatever rises from below does not burn. In the end, all that remains is the song, unfinished, unclaimed, and growing louder until even the silence must kneel. We will continue, but nothing that follows will be pure. Nothing that follows will be sane. Prepare yourself. Episode 8 awaits.